only 2 days after the death threat incident. We were told we could use the footage for a student project, but only if we didn't upload it publicly. We could not pass the class without uploading this project. Suddenly, Nick and I had a lot to talk about. Do you know about the restrictions that are put on you when you hold public office? This one's especially important for documentary filmmakers, politicians, and college students. Today's lesson: public officials can't advocate for policies before the vote, even if they're the experts. To pick up where we left off last week, on October 24th, only 2 days after the death threat incident, a classmate and I had to shoot a documentary about Measure J, a public transit policy that was voted on and approved in 2013. Now, when I started attending Whittier College, I learned that course numbers were divided by the year that the class is aimed for. Like 100 level classes are meant for freshmen, 200 level classes are meant for sophomores, so on. And in the same way that getting a 5 in AP Spanish had let me jump straight into Spanish 355 in college, called Spanish Literature 1, the classes I'd taken at the Horror Motion Picture Conservatory allowed me to skip straight into the junior level film production class, Film 320. That meant I had a much heavier course load than a lot of other freshmen because half the classes I was taking were designed for juniors and seniors. And I got assigned to make and release a documentary that would be 40% of my final grade for Film 320. It was a group project too, and luckily my partner was a sharp guy by the name of Nikil Balakrishnan, who now works in real estate. Back then, he was a senior who was interested in public transit, specifically because there was an upcoming public transit bill called Measure J that was going to be voted on that spring. And each of us had a skill set to bring to the table. I knew how to shoot a film well from a technical standpoint, and he had a topic he was passionate about and knew a lot about. So he directed and produced this documentary about Measure J, and I shot and edited the film. Nick picked me up on the afternoon of October 24th and drove us out to the Metro Tower in downtown LA. I set up my camera on a tripod inside the car and got footage from the highways as we drove in, and it felt like I was really part of LA now. It was my first time being in that area of the city, and I felt like I was successfully pulling off posing as a professional. What are we? Professionals. As we walked into the high-rise Metro Tower building and went to interview some of the workers there. Once we were inside Metro headquarters, we went up to the 7th or 8th floor to meet the people Nick had been in contact with. And all in all, it went well. We managed to interview Marc Littman and then Cosette Stark in their respective offices. We explained that these interviews would be used for the documentary we were making for our film class, and we had them sign release forms that stated who we were, what the project was, and how it would be released on YouTube as our Film 320 mid-semester project. I wish the lighting had been a little better in some of it, but we did the best we could with what we had. When we finished the interviews, we packed up my equipment into the same Pelican case that I'd used on the Carpe Diem trip, and Nick drove me back to campus. It didn't take too long, and that was the majority of our project. I'll always be grateful that he gave me that firsthand experience of the city, especially as a freshman, and I think he was grateful that he could trust me to get the footage that we needed. However, when we got back to campus, we saw an email from someone named Anna Chen that stated that footage from Marc Littman or Cosette Stark could not be used to advocate for Measure J, stating that Metro staff couldn't be affiliated if it was released online. Suddenly, Nick and I had a lot to talk about. We decided that this was a very strange email to receive after we'd completed our interviews. Our project that we were submitting to our professor, Professor Rich Cheatham, was clearly supporting Measure J, and everyone we'd spoken to had also been for it. We'd stated before conducting the interviews that our assignment was to upload the film to YouTube publicly so it would be searchable and viewable in class. But Anna had stated that the Metro staff couldn't be affiliated if it was released online. In other words, we were told we could use the footage for a student project, but only if we didn't upload it publicly. But uploading it online publicly was the only way to complete the assignment. What were we supposed to do? Nick thought that we should post it anyway and say that that was one of the prerequisites of completing the project, as we'd explained to them when we shot the interviews that they had agreed to. This was also 40% of our final grade, so we could not pass the class without uploading this project. I thought Nick was right, and so we did it. We never heard from Metro or anyone else about it, so we figured we were safe. We justified it to ourselves by saying it would almost be a socio-political crime to not release relevant information about an upcoming measure, so we did it with a passion to inform the public about what they were voting on, and a passion to pass that class. Now, we didn't get in trouble for this because the contracts that the interviewers signed expressly stated our intended use of the footage and our intent to post what was recorded online for the public to see in order to pass the class. However, if our contracts hadn't explicitly stated that, we might have been prevented from using the film, which meant we would have failed the class. The only reason we avoided an F was because our interview contracts were airtight and we managed to get an A on the project instead. And I have Nick to thank for that because he was the one who wrote those contracts. What this taught us, though, is that if you hold public office, you are not allowed to advocate for a policy before it's voted on, even if you are the premier expert in the field that that policy affects. I believe this was done in an effort to prevent bias and keep politics out of it as much as possible, but unfortunately it also prevents a lot of experts from openly discussing the pros and cons of policies before they're voted on, as we almost experienced. I don't really understand the details of how it works, but it sure seems to have some flaws. But essentially, if you're looking to make a documentary about something political or socio-political or even just a public policy, make sure that 1, enough time has passed that you can get accurate information from the right people and release it without risking their jobs, and 2, that you aren't putting a target on your back without any kind of protection, as a lot of people who accidentally become internet famous experience, whether it's for political reasons, viral trends, or whatever. Fame before the internet could kind of be a blessing, but these days, it often comes with a curse. That's especially true for minors, but I'll get to that in a later episode. Story time. I was starving when I got back from the shoot, so I ate dinner at the CI with a friend, and as we sat down to eat, I noticed he had circular bruises all the way around both wrists. I pointed it out, and he immediately covered it up with a jacket, but I was like, no, hang on, you can't just brush that off. What happened? Did you get arrested? And he replied, not quite. I was drinking in one of the dorm rooms last night with a freshman woman that I'm kind of into, and a sophomore guy I'm friends with. We get a little drunk, and the freshman starts making out with both of us back and forth. But she was a little kinky, so I ended up handcuffed to the bed frame. Oh, right? So now I'm cuffed to the bed watching the two of them make out, and I'm like, this isn't how I hoped the night was gonna go. But the other guy got too drunk and passed out on the floor, and she turned her attention back to me. Okay. So we end up having sex while I'm still handcuffed to the bed, and the other dude is passed out on the floor next to us. And, eventually I finish. She let me out of the handcuffs, and that's how I lost my virginity. What? That was your first time having sex? Are you all right? Was that consensual? Yeah, I'm fine. We might do that again sometime. But maybe without the drunk guy. I was stunned. College can be a crazy place in a number of ways, but you'll have to tune in next week to hear about my first murder mystery.
A extension to the west side, or a Crenshaw LAX Transit Corridor project, or the Foothill extension of the Gold Line to Zuzor. All these projects are under Measure R, in addition to 15 highway projects. So they create a lot of jobs, they help deal with traffic, and they help improve air quality as well. Measure J is a 30-year extension of Measure R. And the reason that we're pushing for Measure J now is because it's not a new sales tax. It's just an extension of an existing sales tax. It costs about $25 a year for every resident.
Villaraigosa, mayor of LA, who is one of the big supporters of Measure J, one of the people who has been one of the authors of the idea of borrowing against the projected income to get the benefit now, and the people who will be paying their sales tax later will be getting the benefit of the transit that they're paying for.
What they did give us was this: okay, you can borrow through what's called the TIFIA program. We'll pass on our low interest rates to you. You can leverage your Measure R monies with these federal monies. Billions of dollars are available to you, right, all around the country. So The interest rate, for instance, for like the Crenshaw LAX project is only 2.43%. That's incredibly low. So the idea is with Measure J is we be able to bond the revenue stream for Measure R over to now the 2069 if Measure J passes.